A boy was living behind the dumpster. No one knew until the store manager dropped his keys and found a sketchbook instead. Not garbage, not scraps. Art. Pages filled with faces, hands, light, and shadow drawings that shouldn't have come from a kid sleeping on cardboard. One portrait stopped him cold, a perfect sketch of himself, captioned, "The man who never looked at me." What happened next didn't just change the store. It sparked a quiet revolution of doors opening, pencils drawing, and forgotten voices finally being heard. And it all started in an alley. It was the kind of cold that burned. Not the sharp bite of early December or the crisp chill of fall's first breath, but the deep, marrow-stiffening cold that crept into your bones and curled there. The kind that didn't just numb fingers but softened the will. It was late January, and behind Crenshaw's market, the alley was wind-choked and gray. Snow had drifted unevenly into corners, hardened into slush around rusted dumpsters and broken pallets. Most people hurried past it without looking. But behind the stack of cardboard and plastic wrap, there was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 14, 15 maybe. Layers of sweaters clung to him like bark, each one stained in a different way, each sleeve pushed too far past the wrist, or not far enough. His shoes were canvas, wrong for snow, duct-taped at the seams, soles eaten away. He'd built himself a space between the wall and the dumpster cardboard lining the floor, plastic wrapped high to block the wind. An old sleeping bag, mottled and thin, was pulled tight around his frame. Every night he came after the store closed. Every morning he was gone before the lights clicked on inside. The employees had started to notice the scraps of food missing. A bruised apple here. A half loaf of expired bread that should have been in the trash. No one said anything. Some guessed it was raccoons. Some knew better. But none of them saw the sketchbook. Not until the day manager Al Thompson dropped his keys. Al was a heavy-set man with a face made from years of squinting at inventory sheets and long days on his feet. He'd worked at Crenshaw's for almost 2 decades, and he knew every inch of that store, except, apparently, the space behind the dumpster. The keys slipped from his fingers as he pulled the back door shut one morning. They skittered under the dumpster, swearing. Al bent low, grunting as he reached beneath the frozen metal. His fingers brushed fabric. Not metal. Something soft. Something wrapped in tape. He pulled it free. A sketchbook. Black cover. Corners frayed. Pages held together by sheer will. He opened it out of habit and stopped breathing. Inside were drawings. Dozens of them. All in pencil. Some faint, some smudged, all astonishing. Faces, hands, the back of the store, a woman pushing a cart, her hair twisted into a perfect bun, the alley drawn from the perspective of someone who had watched it for weeks, a sleeping cat on a stack of crates, the snow sketched in thin silver strokes, delicate as ash. Al flipped faster, each page more intricate than the last. And then, near the back, a drawing of him. Standing by the delivery truck, clipboard in hand, pencil behind his ear, exact. Al stared at it. And beneath it, in small block letters, "The man who never looked at me." He snapped the book shut. That night, he stayed after closing. Watched through the office window as the alley darkened. At 9:46 p.m., the boy appeared. He moved slowly, head low, the way animals do when they're not sure if it's safe to approach. He wore the same layers, the same duct-taped shoes. His hands were bare. His breath came out in plumes. He paused at the dumpster, reached behind it, stopped. Al stepped outside. The boy flinched. Al held up the sketchbook. "Yours?" The boy didn't move. Al waited. Finally, a nod. "I saw the one you did of me," Al said. "You got the pencil behind the ear." The boy looked away, as if ashamed. "What's your name?" Al asked. "Nothing." "All right," Al said softly. "You hungry?" Still, no answer. Al turned and walked back inside, left the door ajar. The boy followed 10 minutes later. He stood just inside the loading dock, shoes soaked through, a bruise blooming on one cheekbone. Al handed him a sandwich, turkey and cheese, wrapped in foil, warm. The boy took it, ate without speaking. Al watched him carefully. After he finished, Al gestured to the stool by the loading ramp. "Sit." The boy hesitated, then did. "You're good," Al said, nodding to the sketchbook. "Real good." The boy stared at the ground. "Ever shown these to anyone?" He shook his head. "Well, you should." The boy looked up. His eyes were pale brown, almost amber. Mistrust flickered behind them, but not anger. "What's your name?" Al asked again. The boy's lips parted. "Liam." "All right, Liam. You got somewhere better to be tonight?" Silence. "Thought not." Al stood. "There's a couch in the break room. You can sleep there, just tonight. One rule." Liam's shoulders tensed. "No stealing. If you're hungry, you ask, that's it." Liam nodded. That night, he slept curled on the old couch, wrapped in 2 store blankets. The heater ticked and clanged, the clock hummed overhead, and Liam dreamed for the first time in weeks without waking in fear. The next morning, he was gone. Blankets folded. Sketchbook gone. Nothing stolen. But on the dry erase board in the break room, someone had drawn a cat curled in sleep, tail flicked over its nose. It stayed there all week. And the next? Each night, Liam returned. Never before closing. Never asked for anything. But food would vanish from the corner of the counter. A blanket would be laid neatly on the couch the next day. And every so often, a new drawing would appear tucked beneath the coffee pot or taped to the inside of a locker. Faces. Customers. Birds. Al let it happen. He left food on the table without a word, started bringing extra pencils, cleared space in the corner for a milk crate full of sketchbooks. Still, Liam never stayed longer than he had to. Then, one Thursday morning, Al arrived to find something different. A drawing taped to the front window. Large, full page. It showed the grocery store. Not from the street, but from the alley. The dumpsters. The back door. And in the center, a figure holding it open, light spilling into the cold. Below it, in perfect block letters. "Sometimes the world forgets to open a door. Thank you for remembering." Al read it 3 times. Then he unlocked the door and waited. Liam didn't come that night. Or the next. Al kept checking. Every few hours, he'd glance at the security monitor that faced the back alley, watching the flickering black and white feed as if it could answer a question he didn't know how to ask. By the 3rd night, the couch in the break room looked too empty. The folded blankets sat untouched. The milk crate of sketchbooks sat still and silent in the corner, like a voice that had gone quiet mid-sentence. Al didn't tell the others. He didn't explain why he stayed late or why the sandwich on the counter kept going stale. It wasn't their business. It didn't belong in the rhythm of barcode scanners and overhead price checks. It lived in the soft moments between closing hours and moonlight. On the 4th night, the snow came. Heavy this time. Thick flakes that muted the sound of tires on pavement and turned the back alley into a silent white corridor. Al paced by the door, checked the alley every 15 minutes, pulled the door open once and stood in the cold for a long while, just listening. Nothing. At midnight, he gave up. Almost. He was just turning off the office lights when the door creaked open behind him. Liam. He was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, a smear of gray across his jaw like he'd fallen. He wasn't wearing his usual layers, just a too small coat zipped tight, hands red and raw. Al didn't speak. He just stepped forward, reached out, and without a word, guided the boy inside. The door clicked shut against the storm, and the world outside vanished. Liam didn't eat right away. He just sat on the edge of the couch, hands shaking, sketchbook clutched to his chest like it was the only thing that still belonged to him. Al made tea. Not because he liked tea, because it felt like the thing Ellis would have done. Because sometimes warmth had nothing to do with heat. He handed Liam the mug, pulled over the office chair, and sat without a word. After a long silence, Liam whispered, "The shelter kicked me out." Al nodded slowly. "Why?" "I drew on the wall." Al blinked. "What'd you draw?" Liam glanced up. "A door. One that was open." Al exhaled through his nose. a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but wasn't anger either. "You always draw doors?" he asked. Liam shrugged. "Only the kind I want to find." Al didn't respond right away. He sipped his tea, then asked, "You ever think about doing this for real?" Liam frowned. "Artity, drawing, being seen." The boy shifted. "No one pays for pictures anymore." "You're not drawing for money," Al said. "You're drawing because it's the only thing that talks back." Liam blinked. Al leaned back in his chair. "I've got a friend, runs a community center. They've got an arts program, real stuff, supplies, mentors, studio hours. You show up, you sketch, they help." Liam was quiet a long time. Then, "They won't want me." Al tilted his head. "You sure about that?" The boy didn't answer. The next morning, Liam left before the sun rose. As always, the couch was folded neatly. But this time, there was a note taped to the break-room fridge. "I'll go, but only if it's okay to come back." Al tore the note down, folded it, and tucked it into his wallet. The community center was 15 blocks away. Al walked with Liam the first time. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. Just walked beside him as the city slowly opened around them, shop lights flickering on, the smell of bread rising from a bakery vent, the world waking up without knowing it was being watched by a boy who turned it into art. The center director was a woman named Ro. She wore round glasses, oversized sweaters, and spoke like every word carried weight. She took one look at Liam's sketchbook and said, "We'll get you a wall." He blinked. "What?" "Every artist here gets a wall," she said. "A space that's theirs." He looked to Al, then back to Ro. And for the first time since Al had met him, the boy smiled. It was a small thing. Crooked. Quick. But real. Liam came back to the store less after that. Not because he didn't want to. Because he didn't need to. He got a spot at the shelter again, this time one partnered with the center. Started working weekends in a frame shop nearby. Started showing up in places people didn't expect him to be. And once, during a city fair, Al passed a booth where a teenager was sketching faces for free. Fast, beautiful, exact. It was Liam. There was a line stretching halfway down the block. Al didn't say anything, just stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his coat pockets, watching. When Liam looked up and saw him, he raised one hand and waved. That fall, Crenshaw's Market got a new mural. It stretched across the back wall, over the brick that once sat behind dumpsters and shadows. It showed a doorway, wide, light pouring through it, and beneath, in small, deliberate script, "Not all homes need walls. Some just need someone to open the door." Liam never signed it, but everyone knew. And on the bottom corner, near the edge where only the observant might see, a small drawing of a sketchbook rested. Open, waiting, and still listening. Winter returned, as it always did, quiet and merciless. The snow piled against the back of Crenshaw's Market again, just like the year before. The alleyway, once Liam's hidden shelter, now stood clean, bright, repurposed. The dumpsters had been moved. The wind no longer howled through broken pallets. Instead, a bench now sat beneath the mural place where customers waited for rides, where teenagers smoked in half defiance, where strangers sat to watch the city breathe. Al stood by the loading dock one morning, coffee steaming in his hands, staring at the mural. Liam hadn't been around in a few weeks. Not long, not worrisome, he had classes now. Art school. Real professors, real assignments, real deadlines. He came by when he could, left sketches in the milk crate, sometimes left notes. Al didn't admit it aloud, but he missed the kid. Missed the quiet, the sketchbook, the way Liam never said thank you but always looked like he meant it anyway. He sipped his coffee and turned toward the lot. Then paused. Someone was sitting on the mural bench. A kid. Younger than Liam. Thinner. Small frame curled into a coat too big for his shoulders, hands deep in the sleeves. His shoes looked wrong for the snow. His backpack sat at his side frayed and open, with what looked like notebook paper stuffed inside. Al's chest tightened. He set the coffee down. Walked over. "You all right?" The kid didn't look up. Just nodded. Waiting for someone? A shake of the head. You hungry? A shrug. Al tried again. What's your name? Still no answer. He glanced at the backpack. Inside, he saw it. A sketch. Crude, pencil only. Lines heavy, uneven, but familiar. The grocery store. Drawn from the bench. The boy had been watching. Al exhaled slowly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A sketch Liam had left last month. It was of the alley in spring clean, warm in bloom. He handed it to the boy. Someone sat right here once, drew that. Thought the world didn't see him. The boy took the paper, looked at it. His lips parted, but no words came. Come inside, Al said gently. You don't have to stay. Just come get warm. The boy hesitated, then nodded. Inside, Al poured him cocoa, dug out an old hoodie from the lost and found, set up a seat near the space heater. The boy didn't speak, didn't eat right away, but he sketched. Al watched from behind the counter. By noon, the boy had drawn the register. The overhead lights, the way steam curled from a coffee cup nearby. It was messy, raw, but there was something in it. That same quiet truth Liam had. That instinct to see things most people miss. Al didn't press him, didn't ask why he was there, or how long he'd been sleeping outside, or if anyone even knew he was gone. He just let the boy be. The next day, the boy returned. Same time, same bench. He came inside before Al could offer. Didn't speak, but left behind a drawing of the milk crate filled with Liam's old notebooks. By the third day, Al had made up a name for him just to use in his own head. Finn. It fit. Soft, short, uncertain. On the fourth day, as snow began again, Al walked to the back office and pulled out a flyer. The same one he'd used for Liam. The community center. Rose program. He taped it to the break room fridge. Made sure it was where the boy could see. He didn't point it out. He didn't have to. That night, after the boy left, the flyer was gone. 2 weeks later, Ro called. There's a new one, she said. Barely talks, but he draws like he's been listening his whole life. Al smiled. Sounds about right. And later that week, a new drawing showed up on the wall beside the mural. It wasn't big, just a line of figures. One crouched behind a dumpster. One holding a sketchbook. One holding a door open. And the last one, a new figure, smaller, standing beside the bench, looking up. Below it, one line of text. The warmest places are made by people. Al stared at it for a long time, then turned back inside. Another sketchbook had appeared in the milk crate. No name, no signature. But Al knew. The cycle had begun again. Not a repetition, a legacy. And sometimes that's all the world needs. One open door, one safe bench, and someone willing to say, I see you. Spring arrived, disguised in frost. The snow still clung to the gutters and shaded corners of Crenshaw's market, but the wind had lost its teeth. It whispered now instead of howling, as if the city had finally exhaled after holding its breath for months. The alley behind the store stayed clean, the mural untouched, the bench freshly painted, the color of old denim and sky before a storm. Al had started coming in early again, not because he needed to, because something in him didn't want to miss the silence. Those few minutes before the delivery trucks arrived, before the buzz of fluorescent lights filled the aisles, before the world asked anything of him. It was the only part of the day that still felt like memory instead of motion. He sipped his coffee and stood by the rear window, eyes on the bench. No one sat there this morning. But that didn't mean no one had come. Al stepped outside, boots crunching in the thin crust of leftover ice, and walked to the bench. There, tucked just beneath the edge of the seat, was a folded piece of notebook paper. Pencil sketch. Crenshaw's again. But this time, drawn from the eras if the artist had floated up, above the alley, looking down at the building, the mural, the bench, the people who moved in and out of frame like stories without titles. It was signed in the bottom corner, in faint cursive. F.D. Al smiled. Finn had found his voice. It was different than Liam's, less structured, more dreamlike. Where Liam had drawn lines sharp and deliberate, Finn let his pencil drift, as if emotion came first and form came second. But the heart was the same, the weight behind it, the ache, the quiet question in every stroke. "Do you see me now?" Al took the drawing inside, taped it beside the calendar in the break room, and beneath it wrote 3 words. "We do, kid." That afternoon, a woman came into the store asking for Liam. She had bright eyes, a denim satchel slung across her chest, and a university badge clipped to her jacket. "I'm looking for one of his early pieces," she explained. "He told me he used to leave them here. I teach an art history course focus on modern urban sketchers. I wanted to show the class how some voices begin in the margins." Al chuckled softly. "You don't have a big enough wall." She laughed. "Can I see?" He walked her to the back, where the milk crate still sat. Less full now, but never empty. New sketchbooks had joined the old. Not just Liam's. Finn's, too. A girl named Masha, who'd started showing up in February, quietly drawing the produce section and the way light hit the jar lids near closing. Even a stack from one of the clerks, Marcus, who turned out to have a gift for line work he hadn't mentioned in his 3 years of scanning cereal and canned peas. "Take what you need," Al said. The woman sorted through gently, reverently, pulling 3 pages from one of Liam's first book sketches of the bench in rain, of the dumpsters before they were moved, of a figure wrapped in a too big coat, asleep against the brick. "This one," she said, holding up the last. "This says everything." Al looked. The drawing was simple. A hand holding a pencil, the pencil drawing a door. But behind the hand, faintly, was a second set of fingers, ghosted, steadying, guiding. He didn't say anything, just nodded. By summer, the mural had faded slightly. The sun had worn it down, edges blurring, colors softening. Finn noticed it before anyone else, said it felt like the story was whispering now instead of singing. So Al gave him paint, let him touch it up. But Finn didn't repaint the whole thing, didn't restore it to its original boldness. He added something new instead. Beneath the door, he painted a small candle, flickering, simple, the kind a child might draw, and next to it a second candle, lit from the first, and another after that. A trail of quiet flames, disappearing into the distance. When people asked what it meant, Finn just shrugged. "Maybe kindness is like that," he said. "It catches." The mural became a pilgrimage. Teachers brought students. Photographers took portraits in front of it. A local paper did a feature, "The Back Alley That Opened the World." The article included quotes from Al, from Liam, even from Roe at the community center. But it ended with Finn, and a single line from his sketchbook. "I never expected to be part of something, but someone made space for me, and that changed everything." Al read that line a dozen times. Each time, it hit the same. He kept it printed and framed in the break room, right next to the calendar below Liam's first drawing. One day, a kid walked in wearing headphones too big for his head and carrying a roll of butcher paper under one arm. He didn't speak, just walked to the bench, unrolled the paper, and started sketching in charcoal. Al watched from the window. The cycle continued, unasked, unforced, unbroken. And years from now, maybe no one would remember the name Crenshaw's. Maybe the mural would chip away. Maybe the bench would be replaced. But the drawings, the doors, the hands holding pencils, they'd keep showing up in alleyways and sketchbooks, in quiet corners, and between folds of discarded cardboard. Because someone once opened a door, and someone else saw it, and someone else drew it, and someone else walked through. It was nearly dusk when Al found the envelope. Not a letter, not a sketch, just an envelope tucked beneath the roll of receipt paper at the counter, thin, carefully folded, his name scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting across the front. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. No return address, no stamp, just 3 folded pages inside. The first page was blank, except for a single line at the top. "I wasn't supposed to still be here." Al sat slowly, the hum of the store dimming behind him. The flicker of the overhead lights faded into the background. He unfolded the second page. The handwriting was careful, hesitant. I came to Crenshaw's because the alley was dry, that's all. That's what I told myself. I'd been sleeping 2 blocks down, near the bus station, until a fight broke out one night and someone threw a bottle. I moved. The alley behind your store didn't have broken glass. That was enough. Then I saw the bench, the mural. I thought maybe it was some art student project. I didn't know there was a story behind it. I didn't know there was a boy who used to sleep where I slept. I didn't know about Liam, or Finn, or the crate inside. I just thought it was safe. The third page was darker, written in thicker strokes. I didn't plan to draw. I hadn't picked up a pencil in months, but something about the wall made my fingers ache, like they'd been waiting to remember. I didn't have real paper, so I sketched on napkins. Receipts, old flyers. Then one day someone left a pen on the bench, a nice one, wrapped in string like a gift. No note, just the pen. So I drew again. Al's throat tightened. He looked around the store. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He turned the last page. You didn't say anything, but I saw you leave that sandwich, the cocoa, the blanket folded on the crate, the way you didn't ask questions. Thank you for that. You let me stay invisible until I didn't want to be anymore. I've applied to the program Row Runs. I'm scared, but I'm going. And I wanted you to know before I leave this alley for the last time that you opened another door. I don't know your story, but you've now been in mine. With all the thanks I never said out loud, Mira. He stared at the signature for a long time. Mira. He hadn't even known her name. He hadn't known she'd been there, and somehow he'd helped anyway. The lights flickered again above him, the old ballast giving its usual sigh. He stood, folded the letter slowly, and tucked it into the small wooden frame on the counter where Liam's first drawing still rested, beside Finn's candle trail. It fit there, not as decoration, as proof. The mural outside began to catch golden hour light, the paint glowing, soft and worn. A mother paused with her daughter in front of it, pointing to the candle line, tracing it with her finger like a map. A teenager sat on the bench, scribbling in a notebook. Another left a post-it note on the corner of the wall. No name, just 2 words. Still here. Al stepped out into the evening. Watched the way the alley didn't feel like an alley anymore. It felt like a path, a threshold, a place between shadows and sunrise. He thought about Ellis, about the first time he'd seen Liam curled behind the dumpster, about how quickly people passed by what they didn't want to see, and how quietly the world could change if someone just paused. Opened a door, set down a sandwich, left a pen. None of it had been grand. None of it had been loud. But it had been seen, and that had been enough. That night, before locking up, Al picked up the pen Mira had mentioned. It had been sitting behind the counter for weeks, unclaimed, wrapped in twine. He placed it gently in the milk crate, next to the sketchbooks. No note, just the pen, waiting for the next hand, ready to draw a way out. Summer crept into the alley with the quiet patience of someone who'd been waiting a long time to be welcomed back. The frost was gone now, not just from the bricks or the bench or the metal edges of the loading dock, but from people, too. The regulars at Crenshaw's no longer hurried past the mural. They slowed down, lingered. Some sat on the bench just to be near it, even when they weren't waiting for a ride. It had become more than art. It was something like a ritual, a reminder, a memory you could sit inside. Al had stopped trying to count the kids. They came and went in waves, some for a day, some for a season, some who never gave a name. Some who returned years later, with a quiet knock and a nervous smile, older but still carrying the same look in their eyes that barely hidden question, "Do I still matter here?" The answer was always yes. By June, the milk crate behind the counter had turned into a full bookshelf. Sketchbooks, journals, postcards, envelopes sealed and unsealed, drawings on lined paper and receipts and grocery bags. Felix, one of the newest regulars, brought in a label maker and started tagging the shelves. July. Winter 1. Bench Portraits, Untitled Finn, and the Mysterious Unknown Artist 3. which everyone suspected was a shy middle schooler who never came inside but left folded drawings in the storm drain. One Tuesday morning, a woman entered the store carrying a boy by the hand. She looked tired, not frantic. Just the kind of tired that comes from having to be too many things for too long. The boy was maybe 9, holding a sketchbook to his chest like armor. "We were told this was a safe place," she said. Her voice wasn't pleading, it was practiced, ready to be turned away but still trying. Al came around the counter and knelt down in front of the boy. "You draw?" he asked. The boy nodded barely. "Then yeah," Al said. "You're home." That day, they set up a new space in the corner of the back room. A rug, some colored pencils, a second-hand easel that had been donated by a woman who'd once drawn her way out of grief and wanted someone else to have the chance. The boy didn't say much, but he didn't stop drawing. He came back every day that week. And the next? After a month, his mother started volunteering in the floral section, trimming stems and learning arrangement from one of the older clerks. They called her Junie. She never corrected them, so the name stayed. The boy's name was Leo. By midsummer, Leo had created a series of drawings, 12 in total. He called it The Places You Can Breathe. Each one was a corner of the store, the bench, the mural, the alley just as the sun came up, the loading dock when the rain hit it like soft percussion, the freezer door with frost forming on the edges, drawn in meticulous, swirling pencil. They displayed the drawings in the window for one weekend. The next Monday, someone left an envelope addressed to Leo with a note. "I walk past here every day on my way to court. I've never looked up, but your drawing made me stop. Thank you for that, I haven't stopped in years." Leo taped the letter inside his sketchbook. Didn't say a word. Just drew another picture, this one of the letter itself. By August, Roe from the community center offered Leo a spot in a youth program for emerging artists. She didn't promise him fame. She didn't even promise stability. She just promised space. Leo said yes, without hesitation. That week, before his first day at the center, he left one final drawing on the bench. It was simple. The mural. The bench. The crate of sketchbooks. And in the corner, just faint enough to miss if you weren't looking. Back turned, hands in his coat pockets, head slightly bowed like he was listening to a song no one else could hear. Below it, Leo had written, "For the man who never asked me to explain." Al framed it, hung it in the break room beside Mira's letter. And beside that, the label maker tag from Felix. Safe, defined. The store kept moving. People still bought bread and milk and asked about sales. Babies still cried, cartwheels still squeaked. Life continued. But behind the counter, inside the stories and sketches and taped-up scraps of memory, something bigger kept growing. An invisible architecture. Made of listening. Made of welcome. Made of quiet spaces where the world said, "You matter," without ever saying a word. And every time a new drawing appeared, folded under a milk crate, tucked into the edge of the mural, or taped to the inside of the freezer door, Al would stop, smile, and whisper to no one, "Still blooming." The first sketchbook went missing in September. Not stolen, not misplaced, just gone. One afternoon, it sat on the second shelf in the break room, third from the left, tattered spine, blue tape down the center, the initials LJ scribbled on the cover in faint pencil. And the next morning, nothing. The shelf looked undisturbed. No fingerprints, no notes, just an empty space where a story used to be. Al didn't panic. Not at first. Things got shuffled all the time. Sometimes the kids borrowed sketchbooks, forgot to return them for a few days. He asked around. Felix hadn't seen it. Roe hadn't had a new drop-off. Junie said she'd noticed it the week before, admired the page with the park fountain drawn in shadow and negative space. But no one had moved it. Al stared at the shelf for a long time that morning. Then, without saying much, taped a post-it where the sketchbook had been. Page 112. The tree that looked like it was praying. We remember. By the end of the day, someone had added a second note underneath. Page 9. The boy on the fire escape with the newspaper wings, still flying. Then a third. Page 34. The stray dog sleeping under the mural. She was mine. Thank you. It kept going. By the end of the week, the whole shelf was covered. Sticky notes, loose-leaf pages, hand-drawn recreations of sketches remembered only by the way they made someone feel. No one ever admitted to taking the book. No one needed to. It had moved into the world. And in its place, a new one arrived bound in twine, handmade, with recycled pages stitched together. The first page read, "For the ones that leave but never disappear." Al read it 3 times, then gently placed it in the space left behind. He didn't ask who made it. He just knew it was someone who'd been paying attention. By October, the shelf had turned into something else entirely. No longer just a place for sketchbooks, it had become a living tribute. An altar to the anonymous artists who had come through the back door, who had drawn their pain into something beautiful, then vanished like breath in winter air. Ro came by one Thursday and stood quietly in front of it. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she turned to Al and whispered, "It's bigger than us now." He nodded. They both knew it had been bigger than them for a while. That afternoon, Felix suggested a name for the shelf. The Archive. Simple. Honest. A place where stories didn't have to be published to matter, where pages didn't have to be perfect to be sacred. They made a sign, carved into driftwood, painted in soft gray. The Archive. Nothing here is forgotten. The name stuck. By Halloween, kids from the local high school art club had begun stopping by to contribute. They didn't always speak. They just left sketchbooks, charcoal drawings, collages made from torn magazines and loose thread. One left a zine made entirely of sidewalk cracks and snippets of overheard conversations. Another left a single page, a drawing of a hand holding a cracked pencil, blood dripping from the fingers. On the back it said, "I haven't been able to talk about it, but I can draw it, and that's helping." Al pinned that one beside the coffee maker. Not for shock value, but because it was truth, and truth belonged here. Then one evening, the mural changed again. It wasn't planned, it wasn't announced. But when Al arrived the next morning, there it was. A third candle. Smaller. New. Painted just to the side of the trail Finn had started. It glowed faintly beneath the mural's door, as if someone had been waiting to add it, watching for the right time. And next to the flame, in soft yellow paint, "For the ones who don't sign their names." Al stood in front of it for a long time. Didn't touch it. Didn't ask who. He just whispered, "Thank you," and went back inside. By the end of the year, people started calling the Archive something else. Not just a collection, not just a shelf. A movement. A monument to quiet courage. And one day, a city official stopped by, not for groceries, but to ask about a grant. "We're looking to invest in creative community healing spaces," she said. And this, whatever this is, it's working. Al didn't have a pitch deck, didn't have data points or charts. He just walked her to the shelf, pointed at the drawings, the notes, the taped letters, the mural outside, the milk crate, the bench. She cried, didn't try to hide it, just stood there, weeping into her coat sleeve, one hand hovering over the post-it that read, "Page 15, the drawing of the girl and the window. That was me. That's still me." The grant came through. Not a lot, but enough. Enough for supplies, enough for space, enough to tell the kids who had never had a room of their own that their stories would now have a roof. They called the project the Back Door Collective, because that's where most of them had entered. Through the alley, through the forgotten exit, through the place most people never looked twice at. And from that back door, they had built a front-row view into what kindness could become. Al didn't take credit, never wanted it. He kept making cocoa, kept folding blankets, kept checking the shelf each morning to see what had changed. And each night, before locking up, he'd pause by the bench. He never sat, just stood, hands in his coat pockets, head bowed slightly, as if listening to the echo of pages turning in a story that had never stopped being written. The snow returned early that year. not in thick layers or howling gusts, but gently like it was retracing its own footsteps, dusting rooftops, lining the mural with frost, curling at the edges of the sidewalk, as if even winter had learned to approach this place more carefully. Al noticed it first on the bench. A thin layer of snow had gathered overnight, but someone had cleared the center, not all of it, just a small square, exactly the size of a sketchbook. He brushed the snow away and found a new one there, bound with twine and cardboard. The cover was blank, but inside, the first page held a single sentence, written in tight, slanted handwriting. I never knew quiet could be safe. There was no name, no date, just sketches, dozens of them, faces half remembered, hands mid-reach, a girl on a swing drawn from behind, a door cracked open, with light spilling out in long streaks that reached a waiting figure seated on the ground. Al turned each page with the care of someone handling history. He placed the book inside the archive, and, just like that, the story continued. That week, Felix hosted the first open table night. No theme, no prompts. Just a folding table set out by the milk crate, stocked with markers, pens, charcoal, blank sheets, and hot cider. A small sign sat in the center. You don't need to be good. You just need to be here. And they came, one by one. An elderly man who hadn't drawn since he was a boy. A nurse still in scrubs, quietly sketching the outline of a pair of tired eyes. A child who didn't speak but colored 4 whole pages with only one color, deep ocean blue. They didn't speak much. No one asked questions. No one explained their work. They just made. And by the end of the night, the table was covered in stories. Lila stopped by before closing. She had been working at a community shelter across town, helping young women restart their lives. But she still came every Friday, just to sit in the back and remember the rhythm of this place. She picked up one of the drawings from the tableau, simple sketch of the mural with extra candles added. 7 in total. Below it, in small print. For the ones who stayed, and for the ones who almost didn't. Lila looked at Al, eyes full. Do they know what they're doing? She asked softly. He shook his head. They're just surviving, and leaving maps for the next one who gets lost. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Al stepped outside to lock the back door. And paused. A girl stood at the edge of the alley. Just far enough that her feet hadn't yet crossed the line between the world and the mural. She looked maybe 12. Thin jacket, 2 small shoes. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just staring at the wall, at the door painted into it. Al didn't speak. He didn't wave. He just stepped back, held the door open, and walked inside. 5 minutes later, the door eased open again. The girl stepped in. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Al poured cocoa, showed her where the cushions were, pulled a soft blanket from the box marked Extras. She sat, sipped, then pulled something from her backpack, a pencil, and began to draw. By the time morning came, she was gone. But the paper remained, pinned neatly to the inside of the break room door. A single-line sketch. The door in the mural, drawn open wide. Inside, a table. Cups, blankets, people, someone smiling. No names. Just a title, scrawled at the bottom in messy block letters. Some places are more than places. Felix found it first. Framed it before Al could even react. Placed it beside the freezer. And then, because it felt right, added another label. December, girl unknown. That month, strangers started leaving candles at the base of the mural. Real ones. Unlit. Left standing in quiet rows, like a procession that didn't need a leader to form. Some left notes attached. For the day I didn't give up. For the man who let me warm my hands before I had to speak. For the sketchbook that made me feel less alone. By Christmas, there were over 30 candles. Someone began painting them onto the wall, adding their flames one by one in the early mornings. Never seen, never caught. Some believed it was Finn. Others guessed it was one of the newer kids. Al never asked. The mystery felt holy. The city tried to rename the alley. A plaque was proposed. An article ran in the local paper, the alley that became a refuge. But inside, nothing changed. The coffee still brewed too strong. The heater still clicked when it was tired. And every night, before the lights were turned off, Al walked the length of the shelves, the mural, the bench, and waited. Not for fame. Not for thanks. Just to see if someone new had arrived. If another sketchbook had found its way home. If someone had dared to believe they mattered enough to leave a mark. And almost always, someone had. Sometimes just a scrap. Sometimes a drawing. Sometimes only a word. But always something. Because that was the thing about places like this. They never needed a spotlight. They just needed a door. And someone brave enough to hold it open. The thaw came slowly, in inches and size. Not all at Onsano with fanfare or warm winds or springtime theatrics. Just a quiet melt, drips from the roof above the mural, patches of concrete peeking through snow behind the bench. The way customers stopped hunching their shoulders when they stepped inside the store, as if their bodies were finally remembering they didn't have to brace for everything. Inside Crenshaw's, the change was even softer. The milk crate had been replaced months ago, too small for what it carried now. In its place stood a reclaimed bookshelf from the thrift store down the block, painted in gentle pastels by a volunteer named Marta, who'd once drawn nothing but bruises and now taught watercolor at the community center. They called it the archive still, but the labels had changed. Not by design, just evolved. No longer July or Untitled, Finn. Now they read things like, Second Chances, When I Finally Slept, What the Alley Heard, and, near the bottom shelf, a smaller tag written in childlike print, I was brave today. It was Leo's. He'd returned. Not as a visitor this time, or a quiet artist behind a display window, but as a volunteer. 13 now, still shy, still small, but different, shoulders square, eyes steady. He came every Saturday, sat behind the old register and sketched birthday cards for customers without being asked. Left blank ones, too, in case people wanted to write something they didn't know how to say. He called them Words in Waiting. By early March, the sketchbooks in the archive numbered nearly 100, some bound with leather, some stitched with twine, some held together with tape and hope. There were volumes that told love stories in silent panels, pages of a boy drawing a doorway over and over with a speech bubble that just read, Is it okay now? A girl who drew birds so often that people began taping feathers beside her work, not knowing her name, just calling her Feather. Then one afternoon, a man came in wearing a suit. Not fancy, just clean, crisp, shoes that clicked, tie knotted tight. He looked around, said nothing. Bought a bottle of water. Then, as he passed the mural on his way out, he stopped. Froze, really. Al saw him through the window, watched the way the man stared not just at the door painted in the brick, but at the candles, the names. The scrawled lines around the border that weren't signatures but truths left behind by strangers. Then the man sat. On the bench. Not for long, maybe 3 minutes. But when he left, there was a letter. Folded. Unmarked. Taped gently beneath the bench. Al peeled it off after sunset. Inside, in a simple hand, I ran away here once, 23 years ago, slept 3 nights in the alley behind this store, thought I'd never be anything. Didn't draw, didn't write, just sat. But even then, I remember someone leaving soup near the door. Someone turning on the light earlier than usual. Someone seeing me, even if they didn't say anything. It was the first time I thought maybe, just maybe, this world didn't want to break me. I built a life after that. Family. Job. But I never forgot this alley. Thank you. There was no name. No signature. Just the imprint of something real. Al taped the letter inside the staff hallway, just past the lockers. Below it, he scribbled in pencil, Kindness is a map, even if you only use it once. That month, Roe and the kids from the community center started a new initiative. Not a mural this time. Not a shelf. A zine. They called it backdoor pages. Every volume was different. Each issue built from scraps and voices and sketches collected from the store. Anonymous poems, inked silhouettes, doodles of fire escapes and empty chairs, quotes from letters left behind. Snapshots of post-it notes pulled from the freezer door. They printed them by hand. Left stacks near the register in brown paper sleeves, marked only with the words, "Take one. Leave one if you can. Add to it if you must." By spring's end, the zine had traveled. A copy was found in a waiting room downtown. Another was spotted on a subway bench with a flower tucked inside. Someone mailed one to a prison book program. One showed up on the desk of a teacher who'd once sat on the bench crying at sunset and hadn't known how to explain why. Each issue came back fuller than the one before, as if the world had been waiting to be asked to speak softly. One day in April, Lila returned. Hair longer now, eyes softer. She walked through the store like someone who remembered the notes of a song without needing the sheet music. She greeted Al, hugged Leo, walked to the bench and sat down in the sun. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a sketchbook. Not a new one, an old one. The one Ellis had started, the one with her first drawings tucked between receipts and pressed petals. She placed it on the shelf, right in the middle, next to a book titled Start Here and another labeled The Things I Meant to Say. And when Al asked if she was sure, she just smiled and said, "Stories don't belong in pockets." That evening, Felix painted something new on the mural. Small, near the bottom right edge. A pencil, tucked beside the door. Not grand, not glowing, just waiting. And next to it, in looping script, in case someone forgot they could begin again. The next morning, it snowed. Just a flurry. Just enough to dust the bench, line the sidewalk, catch on the lip of the painted pencil. But even then, the door in the mural stayed open, and the shelf inside never stopped growing. By the time the flowers bloomed in May, Crenshaw's Market wasn't just a grocery store anymore. It hadn't been for a long time, not really, not since Liam first left his sketchbook behind the dumpster, or Finn painted the candles beneath the mural's open door, or Mira slipped a folded note between the receipt rolls. It had become something else, something people didn't know how to name, but knew how to feel. Locals started calling the back alley the Light Path. The name wasn't official, no street sign had changed, but that didn't matter. People said it in passing, like an instinct. "Take the light path," they'd say. "It's quieter that way. You'll see the mural. You might feel something." And you would. Even strangers did. Tourists who had read about it online began to show up, not in droves, not in selfies, but in quiet steps and lowered eyes, as if arriving at a place built not of brick and mortar, but of memory and mercy. They sat on the bench. They left flowers. They whispered things to no one. One woman arrived on a Thursday morning with a small urn in her hands. She sat there for almost an hour, not moving, just holding it. When she left, she tucked a photo into the crook of the mural. It was a young boy, drawing, smiling. A note beneath read, "He sketched the door before he ever saw it. Thank you for being real." By June, the archive had spread beyond the walls of the break room. It spilled into the aisles, the windows, the hearts of the people who passed through. Even the employees, those who came to restock yogurt or mop the floor shed, begun leaving pages behind. A young man from produce wrote a single line on a folded napkin and pinned it by the time clock. "I stopped trying to disappear the day someone asked if I'd drawn that." Someone, Elseno one, ever said, who started a new ritual. Every Sunday morning, a fresh page appeared taped inside the staff fridge. Always the same kind of page. Clean white paper, black ink sketch, no signature, just one picture, one offering. A boy standing in the rain. A hand holding another hand. A pair of shoes left beneath a window. A house with no door, but all the windows glowing. A heart stitched together, not pretty, but whole. The employees called them fridge ghosts. Lila joked that if Ellis were still alive, he'd pretend to hate the name and then add his own sketch to the pile. By midsummer, the Light Path hosted its first night of poetry. Not advertised, just a few folding chairs, string lights, a thermos of cocoa, and a microphone standing alone in front of the mural. No stage. No sign-up sheet. Just a space. The first person to speak was a boy no one knew. 16, maybe? Tall, nervous, voice trembling. He stepped forward, unfolded a scrap of lined paper, and read a piece titled, "The Cart I Slept Behind." He didn't look up once. But when he finished, the crowd didn't clap. They stood. Every single person. Silent, still, until someone finally whispered, "Thank you." And the boy, breath shaky, just nodded and stepped back into the dark. The next speaker was a woman in her 60s who hadn't written in years. After that, a college student, hands stuffed in her sleeves, whispering a poem called "Names I Gave Myself Before You Said Mine." They kept going until well past midnight. Al stayed the whole time. Not on stage. Not at the mic. Just in the back. Hands in his coat pockets. Eyes on the mural. He knew that some of the people reading had once slept where the speakers now stood. Some had written their pain in spiral notebooks. Some had stolen food and then returned years later with groceries for the shelter down the street. Some had never spoken aloud until that night. And still, the bench remained. Still, the door stayed open. Still, the pencil on the wall waited for the next story. One Tuesday morning, a new sketchbook appeared on the counter. Bound in cloth. Carefully stitched. Inside, one page only. A child's drawing. A crooked figure. Big smile. Outstretched arms. And beside it, a sentence in blocky print. "I saw the door, and I think it saw me too." Al didn't frame that one. He didn't need to. He just left it on the counter for the rest of the day, open to that page. Anyone who came in and saw it paused. Some smiled. Some cried. One woman touched the page like it was holy. That night, Al sat alone in the break room after everyone had left. The shelves were full. The lights dim. The air still warm with laughter, and the scent of ink and cocoa and jasmine from the bouquet someone had dropped off at the front with a tag that simply read, "Hope for whoever needs it most." He turned in his chair and stared at the archive. Then he stood, crossed the room, pulled a blank sketchbook from the shelf, opened to the first page, and, for the first time since Ellis passed, he began to draw. Not well, not clean, but with truth. A bench, a wall, a door, a hand, a boy with shoes wrapped in duct tape, a girl with a pencil, a man holding a coffee cup, and a path that curved gently from shadow into light. He didn't title it. He didn't sign it. He just closed the book, placed it in the very center of the archive, and whispered, "Still here." Outside, the alley stayed quiet. The wind moved like breath, and the mural faded, layered, sacred, held the weight of all the words too big to say aloud. But if you listened closely, you might hear it. Not a sound. Not exactly. More like a heartbeat. Or a pencil starting again. The morning after Al placed his sketchbook in the archive, a child knocked on the front door of the store before it even opened. Not hard, not desperate, just a quiet knock, like someone trying to ask a question without saying it aloud. Al had been sweeping near the freezer aisle, still waking up with his second cup of coffee. He wasn't surprised by the sound. He'd learned long ago that the ones who knocked that way, the soft, uncertain ones usually, had something important to share. He opened the door and found a girl, maybe 10, standing with one hand clutching a small cloth bag. Her eyes didn't meet his, but she wasn't scared, just cautious. Like someone used to taking up as little space as possible. "I was told this was a place where you can leave things," she said. Her voice was thin, but certain. Al nodded. "It is." She held up the bag. Inside, there was a rock. Smooth, painted, the color of a storm cloud, with a tiny drawing of a house etched into the surface. The kind of house kids draw when they don't know what a real one feels. Like big windows, chimney smoke, too many flowers. "I don't draw good," she said quickly, "but I wanted to leave it anyway." Al knelt down to meet her eyes. "It's perfect," he said. "And it belongs here." She looked relieved, not like she was proud, just like she hadn't been rejected, like she could exhale again. "Can I come see the shelf?" she asked. Al led her to the archive, now expanded across 2 bookcases and a third table lined with shadow boxes and carefully placed pages behind glass. The girl stared for a long time, her eyes moving from drawing to drawing, pausing on a watercolor of a balloon floating through a night sky. "Someone painted that when they were scared," Al offered gently. She nodded. "I think I know how that feels." She stayed for an hour. Didn't draw anything else. Didn't need to. The rock was enough. By the time she left, her name was written on a small white label under a new glass case. Maribel, painted stone, gift. From that day forward, people began leaving more than sketchbooks. A violin string, a feather, a pressed leaf, a photo of a window with the curtains blowing out like breath. None of them came with signatures, just small tags that read, "I carried this for too long. I didn't know where else to put this. Now someone else can hold it." The archive grew again. Not just in size. In shape, it began to curl up the wall, into frames and handmade shelves. Someone donated a handmade cabinet with drawers. Each drawer was labeled not by date or content, but by emotion. Things left behind. First, forgiveness. Unfinished pages. Almost. Home. That last one stayed empty for 3 weeks. Until one Friday evening, just before closing, Al opened it to find a single slip of paper. Folded. Inside, a photo of a couch in a shelter somewhere. Drawn over in ink, with lines added to make it look like a castle. Beneath the photo, one sentence. "This was the first time I believed I'd wake up and still be okay." Al placed it in a velvet tray. Closed the drawer. Wrote nothing else. Later that night, Felix added a new line to the mural. Not a door, this time. Not a candle. Just a window, cracked open, with stars spilling out like confetti, and beneath it painted softly in the same tone as the bricks. Not everyone knocks, some just look in. By the time summer returned, people had started calling it the little museum that listens. Again, not officially, but in hushed tones, in reverent nods. Parents brought their children to the alley like a pilgrimage. Teachers left notes. Grief counselors began using pieces from the archive in sessions with clients who couldn't yet find words of their own. And Al, still steady, still silent in all the right ways, kept opening the door every morning. One day in late July, a boy sat on the bench all afternoon. He didn't draw, didn't speak, didn't move, even when it started to rain. Al brought him cocoa, left it without a word. The boy didn't drink it, but when he finally stood, he turned and handed Al a folded napkin. On it, a single sentence. "I didn't think it was okay to exist until I saw the wall." He walked away, didn't come back, but his words lived on, pinned to the bulletin board in the staff hallway. Above it, a note from Felix. "This place doesn't heal you. It lets you remember you were never broken." And then, one August evening, just as the sun bent low over the alley, someone new arrived. She didn't look like the others. No sketchbook, no bag, no tremble in her shoulders. She was older, late 20s, maybe, wearing hospital scrubs and headphones around her neck. She walked the length of the mural, traced her fingers across the edge of the pencil, drawn years ago, and sat down on the bench with a deep, weary sigh. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But after a while, she pulled out a folded page from her pocket and laid it beside her. Al watched from the doorway, waited until she left, then retrieved it. A poem, typed, crisp, deliberate. It read, "I stitched people together all day, and then came here to fall apart. Thank you for letting me." No name, no title, just the weight of truth, held like breath. Al placed it in the drawer marked "Whole" and stood for a long time beside it. The mural glowed in the amber dusk. The shelf grew another inch, and inside, beneath the lights and the scent of old paper and something freshly blooming, a single pencil sat waiting in a jar near the counter. Ready, because the stories hadn't stopped. They never would. Not here. Not in the place where even silence had its own voice. Not in the store with the mural and the bench and the door. And the people who kept coming. Some to speak. Some to draw. Some just to remember how it felt to be seen. The sketchbooks stayed. The candles glowed. The archive held steady. And the back door? Still open. The last days of August came wrapped in heat waves and silence. The kind of heat that made the city feel quieter, slower, as if even the streets were holding their breath. The mural had faded a shade lighter under the sun, and the sketchbooks in the archive curled ever so slightly at the edges, whispers of use, not decay. But everything else inside Crenshaw's remained exactly as it had become, a monument disguised as a grocery store, a sanctuary no one had the words for, and a story that kept stretching, quietly, into tomorrow. Al stood by the back window one morning, watching a boy and his mother linger near the mural. The boy pointed to the pencil Felix had painted beside the door, and the mother nodded, then knelt beside him to listen. Not rush, just listen. Al didn't know their names, didn't need to. He'd learned that the names weren't always the truth. Sometimes the truest thing a person had was the silence they kept. That morning, a new sketchbook appeared on the edge of the register. It wasn't tucked away like usual. It wasn't quiet about being left behind. It was placed carefully, deliberately, its spine facing outward like a spine should held upright, like it belonged. On the cover was a drawing of the mural bench. Empty. On the back cover, written in looping cursive, "I sat here for 4 weeks before I realized I didn't have to wait for permission to be seen." Al opened the book. The pages weren't like the others. They weren't filled with art. They were filled with instructions. How to hold your breath without drowning. How to sit on a bench and not vanish. How to recognize the first time someone meant it when they asked, "Are you okay?" How to stop apologizing for taking up space. Every page was a guide, a letter, a memory disguised as a lesson. He read every one. And when he got to the final page, he found the last entry. How to say thank you without saying a word. Leave something, anything, a page, a line, a heartbeat. He placed it on a shelf by itself and added a new label. Instructions for returning to yourself. That week, a teenage girl named Roya came into the store with a stack of black and white photocopies. She didn't ask anyone for permission. She just started taping them to the back wall near the mural, carefully layering each page like scales or feathers. They were fragments of her sketchbook, she explained. Pieces, lines. She called them echo sheets. "I figure," she said, "if someone sees even one piece of someone else, it might be enough to keep them here." She didn't elaborate on what "here" meant. No one needed her to. By the next day, strangers had started adding to it. Postcards, movie tickets, half-written letters never sent, the receipt from a first bouquet, a drawing of a hotel key someone had once clung to when nowhere else felt safe. Felix turned it into a protected wall installation and called it The Surface. Lila added an index to it, the way museums do. But instead of descriptions, each item came with a single line of text, curated not by fact, but by feeling. "I remember the weight of this. Some loves live on napkins. This was once the only proof I had that I was still here." One afternoon in early September, the city inspector came through. Clipboard, tie, a face like someone used to rooms staying clean and shelves staying orderly. He didn't smile much. Didn't say much either. Walked through the aisles, checked the fire extinguisher, tapped the walls with his knuckles, like he was listening for hidden flaws. Then he found the archive. He stood in front of it, confused at first, as if he couldn't quite square it with what he was expecting. He picked up a drawing, just one of a girl sitting at the foot of a bed, arms wrapped around her knees, the shadow of a door open just slightly behind her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, "What's all this?" Al thought for a moment. Then said quietly, "It's the part of the store that sells nothing but gives everything." The inspector looked again. Then, slowly, he nodded. On his way out, he left a business card on the counter, nothing written on it. But later, when Al flipped it over, he found, Page 11. The father who meant well but didn't know how. I was him, still am. That night, after closing, Felix arrived late, looking tired but content. He carried a box plane, cardboard. No marking sand inside was a new addition for the mural, a mosaic tile frame, made from broken pottery donated by locals who said they wanted their shattered pieces to be part of something whole. Al helped him lift it into place. Together, they mounted it near the base of the mural, framing the painted pencil and the door. It didn't flash or sparkle. It didn't interrupt the art. It just held it. Like arms. They added a sign underneath. Things break. Sometimes on purpose. Sometimes beautifully. A week later, someone left behind a journal. Thick, leather-bound, untitled. Inside, page after page written by different hands. As if the world had passed the book from person to person without Al ever seeing it happen. Each entry started the same. Dear me. And then came confessions. Fears. Truths no one could say aloud. Dear me. You were never too much. They just didn't know how to carry something that honest. Dear me. I'm proud of you for walking away, even when no one followed. Dear me. It wasn't your fault. By the end of the book, there were over 60 letters. None signed. Al placed the journal in a clear box and set it near the register. People came just to read it. And some left their own entries, folded into envelopes, and slipped under the glass. They called it the Mirror Book, because somehow, reading it felt like seeing yourself. By the end of fall, Crenshaw's had become the kind of place people came to after funerals, after bad days, after silence that had stretched too long. They didn't always buy anything. Some just stood in the aisle between cereal and crackers, staring into space like they were trying to find words again. No one ever asked them to leave. No one ever hurried them. One night, a young man came in and walked straight to the archive. He didn't browse. Didn't pause. He carried a sketchbook that looked worn to the edge of disintegration. Al had seen books like that before. Not because of time, because of survival. The man walked to the shelf and placed it between two volumes. When I Almost Stayed, and Don't Forget This Light. Then he stood back, watched it settle, and whispered, That's where I belong. Al stepped beside him. Didn't speak. Just nodded. And together, they watched the stories touch. Later that night, when the last customer had gone and the store had returned to silence, Al stood in front of the mural, hands in his coat pockets, heart full, and for the first time in months, he turned to the shelf, picked up a pencil, and wrote a note. Just one line. Taped it to the register. We are not lost things. We are the things that found each other. Then he turned off the lights, left the door unlocked for a little longer, and let the quiet take over warm, waiting, alive. Because in this place, the story didn't end. It never would. The first frost of November came overnight. No warning, no flurries. Just a sudden hush across the city, the kind that settles into windowsills and tree branches and hearts still caught in summer's echo. Crenshaw's alley was quiet that morning, the mural dappled in pale gray light, the bench holding a thin sheen of ice across its surface, and for a moment, just a breath, it felt like everything had stopped, paused. Then the bell above the front door chimed, and the moment passed. A boy walked in. Not young. 16, maybe 17. Al hadn't seen him before. His coat was heavy, layered in a way that spoke of nights spent outside. His shoes didn't match, but he didn't look desperate. He looked determined, like someone who had followed an invisible trail across rooftops and alleyways and memory just to find this place. He didn't say a word, just walked straight to the archive. Al watched from behind the counter as the boy ran his fingers across the spines of the sketchbooks, not reading, just feeling. Then, with slow care, the boy pulled a folded paper from his pocket and placed it gently on the shelf. It was blank. No writing, no image, just a page. But something about the way he left it soft, like placing a flower on a grave, made it feel heavier than any story that had come before it. He turned to go. Al cleared his throat. You don't want to leave a mark? The boy paused at the door. Without turning back, he said, "That was the mark." And he stepped outside, disappearing into the cold without another word. Al approached the shelf and stared at the page. Still blank. But it stayed. And people noticed. One person left a note beside it. Sometimes silence is the whole sentence. Another pinned a sketch. A person holding a sign that read, "I don't know how to ask for help, but I'm still here." A third simply drew a heart broken in two, but stitched together with thread. By the end of the week, the blank page had become a shrine of sorts, a center, a quiet kind of compass. They began calling it the first step. Felix placed it in a display case with a small plaque. The first step, for those whose story hasn't been written yet, but whose presence already matters. And beneath that, someone scribbled a line in pencil. The book begins when you decide not to run. That winter, more blank pages began to appear. Left on benches. Taped to the mural. Slipped into shopping carts. They weren't empty out of fear. They were full of intention. Each one carried the weight of the decision to stay, to hope, to begin. And people treated them with reverence. A woman left a flower pressed between two. A boy wrote a date on his, the day he'd decided not to end everything. A man who hadn't spoken in years came in one evening and simply nodded to Al, then slid his page under the counter. When Al unfolded it later, it read, "I'm still learning how to speak, but I wanted you to know I was here." Lila came in one day, leaned over the counter, and said softly, "They're not blank pages anymore, are they?" Al shook his head. "No, they're proof." She smiled. "Of what?" "That they chose to begin." Spring was still months away, but inside Crenshaw's, the warmth came early. Not in temperature. In presence. In the way people lingered longer. In the soft shuffles of feet near the archive. In the sound of sketches being turned slowly, like pages of scripture. In the soft hum of someone reading aloud in the corner, not to anyone, just to themselves, just to hear the words exist in the air. And on one particular morning in late December, the first snow fell again. The alley glowed. The mural held its colors beneath the frost. And on the bench sat a new sketchbook, wrapped in red twine, tied shut. Al picked it up gently and saw the words carved into the cover. To the next one. He placed it on the top shelf of the archive. Dead center. Let it rest there, untouched. For the one who would need it most. And as the first customer walked in, smiling against the cold, Al turned to the mural one last time and whispered, "The story's ready for you now." And just like that, the page turned.